I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
All right, so just to introduce ourselves, because I realize we haven't been in the last few episodes, I'm a financial journalist. I anchor a show on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio, but I've been focused on the car industry for a good 20 years.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and I've been writing about cars for about 20 years. First for Forbes, and now for Bloomberg. I just had my 10-year anniversary for Bloomberg. And I focus on the fun stuff, the luxury brands, the collectible things, the things that you might aspire to buy and collect. I always say Bloomberg often tells you how to make money, but I'm going to help you spend your money.
Yes, Hannah focuses on the luxury stuff and the collector's market and the sort of high end. I'm interested more in the trucks and kind of the rugged
earthy
stuff. I like American muscle, but we overlap in our love for Porsches, for example.
It's a Venn diagram of sorts.
Yes, it is.
If you will. And motorcycle riding, of course.
Also true. True. I remember when you first came here and I was like, cool, she rides bikes also, here being to Bloomberg. Let me go through the topics that we're going to cover today for our listeners. We're going to kick it off with Porsches. We're going to talk about a very interesting Porsche that you drove and some of the stuff that Porsche is doing in... Is it skunk works the right word? In kind of their off-road racy segment?
They never use that term, but I think that's a good term for it. They kind of say, oh, it's the stuff we do on Saturday mornings when we are having our coffee and talking.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about the Ford F-150 Lightning, because not only did I drive it last week, and I ended up having a great time with it. It was incredibly useful. But also, they've introduced a new off-road kind of raptorized version of the Lightning that they plan to bring to King of the Hammers.
I think this is a really bold move, and more automakers should do this type of thing, and I'll call out some names later.
Yeah, and they're doing a ton of it. I think they're putting more into their race program this year than they ever have at Ford. We're also going to cover something that, I love recent classics, or I love newer used cars.
Define recent, Matt. Define 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah, 10, 20 years. 20 is maybe even too far back. I like recent cars because they're safe and they have all the tech that I need, but they've already taken the depreciation hit. And I've found one very interesting in the 2016 BMW M4 GTS. It's so weird and unique that I'm excited to talk about it and hear what you think as well. But let's kick it off with Edith. First of all, tell us who Edith is.
So we touched on this last week after I had driven her, but before the embargo lifted. And Edith is this chopped up 911 Carrera 4S that Bloomberg took to the top of a volcano in Chile and set an altitude record of over
Bloomberg?
Sorry, that Porsche did. Let me rephrase that. We don't have our own skunk works yet, but maybe Matt and I will start that. Porsche took it to the top of this volcano and set an altitude record for over 22,000 feet above sea level. They are claiming it's the highest that any machine, 2 wheels or 4 wheels, has ever driven. And the car was driven by Romain Dumas, this amazing French driver. He does a lot of off-road and hill climb stuff. So that's very cool. So Porsche, I think, is just trying to get some mileage out of the car. It's a one of one. They actually have, they have 2 of them. They're slightly different. But they invited
Edith
me.
is one, right? Named
Edith
for
is
Edith
one.
Piaf. And
Exactly.
the other one has an equally old-sounding name.
The other is Doris. I mean, they're basically named after some of the engineers' grandmas. I said, well, where do the names come from? And they're like, well, we like Edith Piaf, and it was driven by a Frenchman, but also that's my grandma's name. And I think the same applies to Doris. But I went out in Malibu and drove them on this very cool off-road course. I actually drove both. I only wrote about the Edith drive because that was the record-setting car, but I drove both, and they're actually 7-speed manual cars, which I've never driven a manual off-road. I've driven a bunch of things off-road, but they all happen to have automatic. These were 7-speed manual, but it's a type of manual that, first gear is like 5 miles an hour. Second gear is like 10 or 15 miles an hour. It's very, very, very reduced ratios so that you can really crawl over boulders. Porsche was big to say, look, these cars are not like the 911 Dakar that we saw that they're selling. That's like a $220,000 car. These are not for sale. the Dakar is for, like driving fast across sand. These are for crawling over rocks. So yeah, I did some rock crawling. I blasted up some hills as fast as Edith would go. And I mean, talk about loud clanging. The inside's completely stripped. It's literally a steel cage. There's one seat in it. There's a hydraulic handbrake. There's onboard oxygen. It was pretty wild. And I have to say, it was so fun. My takeaway was, hey, the car's great, but a record in Chile is a bit remote and not exactly relevant. Why don't we put these cars in something like King of the Hammers or something, like put it in a public race and put your money where your mouth is?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gone to King of the Hammers, but I love these vehicles built for the Dakar or built for the Baja, the fast ones. And in the truck world, there are a lot. The Raptor obviously is one, and the TRX is kind of along those lines. But you got to go to like a Dodge Power Wagon for more like a rock crawler, or really a Jeep, right? Some Broncos are outfitted for rock crawling. Some Broncos are outfitted for speed. These Porsches are outfitted for the rock crawling thing. And for me, I don't feel like it would be as much fun, but I've never actually done it. So maybe if I did some rock crawling, I would understand the enjoyment of sloth.
That's a good way to put it. It is so fun. And in California, especially in some of these desert states, it's such a wild culture. King of the Hammers is starting next week. And it's going to
King of the Hammers have like a number of different events, or what is it?
It's a big it's a big series of races out in the desert, a couple hours outside of Los Angeles, and people build their own and companies build their own trophy trucks. That's sort of a generic colloquial term for these big rock crawlers that will literally climb up the side of a mountain, for lack of a better word. It's amazing what they can do, and none of this is high speed. It's kind of slow motion. You might almost think it's a little bit boring to watch because it is extremely technical and extremely slow. And admittedly, it's really niche, which I think is why Porsche isn't making more Ediths. This is so niche.
Right.
The Edith is not even road legal. You can't have her on the open road. This is really niche, but it's fun. It's kind of an expensive hobby. It sounds like, wow, you're just out in the desert with some trailers, and like it's actually really deceiving because you're out in the desert for a week and you look, like you haven't bathed, and it's very Mad Max / Burning Man, but that's actually cool, and there's a lot of money behind it.
So I was listening to Eddie Alterman with Ezra Dyer, these road and track guys, and they were talking about the success of the faster off-road vehicles like a Raptor or a Dakar also, because not only are they more capable than anyone really needs to go to Starbucks, but they're great for commuting in urban areas. The rock crawling vehicles, they're not going to have the same kind of appeal to your average commuter, right?
No, but
so you've got to do to go to Moab, or you've got to do a King of the Hammers
Death
in order
Valley,
to use these things.
Baja,
it just strikes me as expensive.
It's wildly expensive. I mean, fuel, logistics, being out there for a week, and then the trucks themselves are so expensive. But you bring up a really good point, and this is reminding me, even Lamborghini made that off-road Huracan, the Storado, which they are selling, and I actually had a chance to drive as well. And that is not a rock crawler, but in a way, that's like the perfect commuter Lamborghini.
Totally.
Because normal Lamborghinis they're a little bit stressful to drive, or they can be, because even if you're just driving over sort of uneven pavement, it's tricky, and you've got to really be careful when you're pulling in and out of the Sunset Tower, and make sure you don't chin it at all on the pavement as you're pulling out. But with something like the Storado, which gives you a little more clearance and some sort of underpinnings that can help prevent against scratching, that's actually a very drivable Lamborghini.
Yeah, no, the race cars, the supercars, the hypercars.
Yeah.
They look cool, and the stats are amazing, and they're beautiful pieces of art in most cases, or in a lot of cases, but they would be difficult to drive on the daily. I feel like Matt Farah built his own garage because he didn't want to curb his Countach, you know?
Probably. I remember him telling me when he was just building it about the minutia of measuring like the turning angles and the turning radius around every single ramp in that garage. I mean, he approached it like a complete mathematician.
Yeah.
For that very reason.
Yeah, I've heard him explain that, and it always sticks in my head as well. Speaking, though, of King of the Hammers, I mentioned the Lightning. I've been driving it for the last week, and to me, it's had such great utility that it's grown on me. Although there's no passion for the Lightning. You know, when I see it, when I get in it, it's comfortable and it's big, and I like those things. It's capable of holding 2 rear-facing car seats in the back, which I need right now. It was great in the snow. We had a snowstorm in New York, and it's proved very capable.
How's the battery life in the very extreme cold? Because that's been in the headlines lately.
So I was having so much fun doing my sort of charging experiments, like journalistically charging it.
Is this a scientific test?
Well, I wanted to see what it would be like to live with in the real world. I've heard all these horror stories about Electrify America, and indeed, the wait times are usually long. Not all of them work, and it takes a lot longer than you feel like it should. Plus, to my surprise, it costs a lot.
To charge.
It costs me like $60 to charge from 20% to 80% or 90%.
Seems like a lot.
I know. I thought the whole idea was you get free juice.
$8.
And probably if you buy one, you get a pass for a few years or whatever. And anyway, because I was charging it so much, I didn't have any issue with range anxiety this time. And I was also able to floor it in sport mode a lot, it's so fast. It's so quick.
Do you have a charger at your home?
No, I don't. Oh. That's why I was driving to these Electrify Americas. But near me, there are a bunch of them. And in any case, the thing is so useful but boring. And now Ford is going to make a new version of the Lightning for King of the Hammers with a company called Switchgear. Yeah, you saw the release?
Yeah, I saw the release there. I know that they have extended the track width on the Lightning, and they've improved the ride height, and they've adjusted the suspension, and they've put in these shock absorbers. It seems like they've kind of given it the Safari Baja treatment that we were just talking about with Porsche and Lamborghini.
Like a Raptor. It seems like they've Raptorized it, and although because they're working with RTR vehicles to make the Lightning switchgear, it's going to be not using the term Raptor, I would assume. But yeah, a wider track is what they did with the original Raptor. In fact, when they did that back in 13 or so, Ford said no one else could do it because they didn't have the width on the production lines, which is pretty cool.
Interesting.
And I think the instant torque is going to be a huge bonus to the kind of rock crawling or hill climb activities that would be at King of the Hammer. We're recording this on a Wednesday, so I haven't seen the thing either, but when it drops on Saturday, people will have seen it. And they're doing a bunch of other stuff as well. I noticed in the press release, they said they're going to build a new version of Raptor, a race version of Raptor for the Dakar, and they're working with the BMW M Sport division.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So cool. It's kind of weirdly collaborative.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like usually if an automaker uses components or collaborates with another automaker, they don't really talk. They don't talk about it.
It's somehow shunned as well by the public. Everyone seemed so offended that BMW and Toyota worked together, and they thought the Toyota was too much of a BMW, which is weird. I would think you're worried about the BMW being too much of a Toyota.
Completely.
But I love it when car makers work together, and I get why they're restrained a little bit. But let's face it, everyone's using the same, at this point, displacement, right? The 2-liter 4-cylinder or a 3-liter 6-cylinder or a 4-liter 8, they're all using the same plans and spending individual money to build these things. Why don't they work together more often? And Ford has been pretty good about this. They work with Volkswagen. I think in the dawning of the electric vehicle, more and more of them are realizing they can invest together.
I was just going to say that I think the older, well-established OEMs would probably are doing well to work together because, as we've spoken about before, there's a whole host of startups and electric guys that are coming to eat their lunch when it comes to electric vehicles. So I don't want to pit it as, it's the old automakers versus the new ones, but I do think the established automakers have a vested interest in figuring out how to survive together in this new world. Do you get a sense that Ford will be selling this at some point will be selling this switchgear or some future version of it?
I would imagine that if it's successful and if they can make it work from a cost side, they will, because they've made so much money. They started the whole Baja racing truck for sale thing, kind of, and with the Raptor, and then
Raptor wildly successful.
Yeah, hugely successful, and the Bronco has been very successful, and everybody wants one of these. Obviously the Jeep Wrangler has been successful for decades. Everybody loves these specialized vehicles that are capable of far more than they're going to use them for. The G-Wagon, is iconic. The Range Rover, they easily charge $200,000 for these things, and nobody takes them off-road ever. Right?
Yeah, and you know what? In spite of that, I think the real opportunity for the money-making is all of the upgrades and add-ons and all of the off-road kits and gear and all of that. I mean, that's what makes Wrangler so profitable for Jeep, and we've had them say this, that it's everything else that people are adding on to their off-road truck, whether or not they actually go off-road. That's where the real moneymaker is for the automaker.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think they'll sell the F-150 Lightning switchgear eventually in some form if they can make it work from the cost side. This new Raptor race vehicle, I couldn't tell from the press release if it's for racing only or if it's going to be like Raptor R Gen 2.
I don't know. I'm looking at the material. It says that the truck will take learnings from 2024 and be designed along with the M Sport, and they're going for the outright win. So that's at Dakar, which again, this is a prestigious, global, long-running race. Porsche needs to get in there. I really think if Porsche has such a history of doing adventure races, Carrera Panamericana, they should do something like this. They need to get in there. And Ford's doing a great job of it.
We should once again mention that we have an email address, by the way.
Oh, yes.
For anyone to write in with questions or suggestions. What's the email address again?
The email address is hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. And hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. And that's Bloomberg, B-E-R-G, in case you are unaware.
Exactly, instead of Borg, the German mountain. And we should also deep tease our guest for next week, because while we're talking about race, off-road races and King of the Hammers, we have a great guest for next week who has won off-road races and will be, attending King of the Hammers or running it?
Yeah. So Emily Miller is the head of communications for King of the Hammers, and more specifically, she is the founder of the Rebel Rally, which is the longest running off-road rally in the United States. It happens to be for women only. I myself have participated in it. I was paired with an amazing navigator named Susie Saxon, who I'm still in awe of because I cannot figure out how she was navigating. It's a type of race where you don't use GPS, you just use maps and compasses and some of those plier-looking things. I don't know how she does it.
Non-digital.
Yeah, but Emily is a record holder. She has driven a solo off-road from Reno to Vegas and set records. And she's going to be with us next week talking about just this culture, where the growth is, why automakers are really tapping into it, like Ford. Why it's important for them to be here. And she's just kind of a badass. I'm a big, big Emily Miller fan. All
right. And no relation to me that I know of, but very much looking forward to it. So everyone's getting into it. Porsche's setting altitude records. Ford is going to bring its electric truck to King of the Hammers. And obviously they kicked off the whole Raptor TRX, in a sense, kind of Power Wagon. I know people say, Power Wagon came before, but the popularity of it soared with Ford's release of the Raptor. Everyone, including BMW and the M Sport division, is apparently excited to go off-road. But I want to talk about an M vehicle that would never go off-road and is apparently difficult even to drive on the road. So this is the recent classic that I think is maybe undervalued right now. That is the 2016 BMW M4 GTS. Now, I hadn't even heard of this until...
Yeah. How did you hear about this?
My neighbor is thinking about buying one. He's a total BMW fan, and he has an M2, the last generation. He loves a stiff ride. He loves, a manual transmission. He just likes to be in touch with the road, and apparently,
tactile.
Yeah, the GTS, although it doesn't have a manual, fits that bill of a very tactile vehicle. In fact, a lot of people debate whether it's more just a track car than it is a road car. Let me tell you the weirdest things, though, about it. First of all, it's got water injection, and I'd never heard
What does that even mean?
of this before. There's a 5-liter tank in the back that you're supposed to fill with distilled water every 3 or 4 times you gas up, and then with an injector, it shoots it in with the air mixture to lower the intake temperature by 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty cool. It adds 70 horsepower to the normal M4 and 40 pound-feet of torque. So, you're talking about almost 500 horsepower, I think 440 pound-feet of torque in this M4 GTS. And they only made, I think, 700 globally and maybe 300 for the U.S.
That's cool. That's a truly limited edition.
Exactly. So it's this kind of limited edition that, the previous GTS was an M3 GTS from the E92 generation that you were talking about last week, and everybody was offended by the price. They're like, why would I pay $130,000 for this M3 GTS, double the price of the regular M3? Well, I've looked on, Bring a Trailer and some other auction sites. They're now going for over $200,000.
Wow.
So
but these are not yet. Not yet,
no,
right?
these are still.
The
so the M4 GTS, it sold for I think 134, and the regular M4 was 70 grand. So also double the price. But I'm seeing them for 80, 90, 100. Sales made on Bring a Trailer over the past couple of years, 90 and 100. And of course, the past couple of years have been a crazy time for prices, but they're just not back to the MSRP, which is weird because if you look at limited editions of the BMWs, like the CSL or the previous GTS, if you look at limited editions of a 911 or any of these high performance cars, they all go for more than the sticker. Almost the second they roll off the lot.
Yeah. Yes. This is interesting. So why not with the M4? You said it was hard to drive.
So Jason Camissa did a video which was kind of funny, but I couldn't tell if he was angry with the M Sport division or if he was thankful for the M Sport division, because he does this whole spiel where it's impossible to get out of his driveway, and then every speed bump is difficult because the front splitter is so low that you're going to rub it on everything. It's got a massive tail, and as far as I can tell, it's one of only 2 road-going BMWs that comes with a giant wing on the back.
Oh, God, that's embarrassing.
Both the splitter and the wing are adjustable. God. Yeah, but you know what I would do? If I was going to buy one of these things, I would take off the splitter and the wing and put them in my garage.
Yes. I mean, this sounds like the exact opposite of what we were talking about with the commuting Lamborghini.
Exactly. It seems difficult to drive.
Yeah, it can take the fun out of it. And also, one little scratch on that splitter is going to it's instantly going to make it look trashy.
Yeah, carbon fiber. I don't know the price of the splitter, but I know the wing is a $6,000 wing. So the splitter's got to be very expensive as well.
Yeah, that's a lot.
The water tank is a $4,000 piece of equipment. So if you have a problem with the water injection, which by the way, the water injection starts at 5,000 RPM. No, I optional.
You must do the distilled water thing.
That's the whole point. I mean, you don't have to. You can let it run out of water. And I talked to the BMW techs about it. Wow. If you run out of water, it just doesn't inject at 5,000 RPM, so you don't get that extra boost. And you do have to be driving in that high rev range to enjoy it.
What does it rev to? Do we know?
I don't know. I don't know the rev limit, but it's high. And that's another thing about these super sporty cars. Like, they're difficult to drive because of the stiff ride. You don't want to scratch up the splitter. And a lot of cars you have a lot of these kind of cars. You have to be doing 5, 6, 7,000 RPM to really love it. And how often are you driving in that rev range?
I mean, that's a lot of emotion. That's a lot of energy. Like, yes, it is fun to drive aggressive and have like a very spirited drive, but man, that's not every day doing that. Man, sometimes I just want to relax. Do I have to do it all the time?
Which is, I mean, you drove the ST, right? I don't know if it was like that, but the GT3, the Porsche 911 GT3 is like that, and even the Touring, you still have to ring it out. That's not what I would want to do. Yeah,
it's fun for an hour, but like I don't have the space to keep a car that I just drive for an hour at a time. Really, it would be nice if I did, but I guess you have to. This seems like this is a very specific tool that is not a Swiss Army knife. Well, this is a very specific tool.
So I'm going back and forth with my neighbor. Should he get it? Shouldn't he?
Okay.
So he is the type of person that likes that rough ride.
Cool. Okay.
And he doesn't put, 15,000 miles a year on his car.
Cool.
He can work from home sometimes, and he has another, family vehicle, so he can regular drive. So I think he would like it, and I think it will increase in value. But I'm just not sure if he would be able to get over the drawbacks of having a racetrack car as your commuter.
Does it have a roll cage in it?
It has half. This is another one of the dings on it.
Okay.
It has, I think. The U.S. version wasn't able, because of regulatory rules, to have a full roll cage, so it only has the half cage. It wasn't able to get the carbon fiber bucket seats, which the European spec ones did have, but it cost $20,000 if you want to add them onto your car in the U.S. They weren't even able to put the fire extinguisher in back, which the European models came with. So the U.S. model was kind of held back a little bit by regulations.
Yeah. I think that's the really interesting thing about like street legal track cars. It's you kind of end up feeling like they're half in, half out on the track, and it's difficult to get one that's kind of perfect because a lot of tracks require a roll cage if you're going to take the car on a track. But a lot of cars that are sold as, track ready don't have a roll cage because of exactly what you're saying. Regulations don't allow it. So
and they also, I mean, the fact that they take a lot of the stuff out of the car and then charge you more, people get angry about that, right? Porsche has been doing that for decades.
Yeah, genius, really.
But I noticed that on this GTS, it only has 2 stereo speakers, and they're on the rear deck lid. So that would be weird.
Well, knowing you'd get right in there and get something better.
I would definitely get an aftermarket solution in. But the previous generation M3 GTS didn't even have a stereo in it.
You know these guys that say you should really just be listening to the sound of the engine?
That's what everybody on forums says, and it makes me so angry.
I'm glad, because honestly, half the fun of driving is listening to music.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, this is some of the best times for listening to music, and I never could agree. I've even been in cars where people get in and turn off the radio, and it is very annoying.
Yeah, I'll put the windows down and listen to the engine, up at Bear Mountain around some corners. But when I'm cruising there and back, I want to have like Sabbath on, or I mean, depends what car and what mood you're in. But you want to have some driving music on. And what kind of driving music do you listen to?
It totally depends. It could be like Hole. It could be Jay-Z. Today it was Jay-Z. It could be, this is embarrassing, Jack Harlow. I asked someone about him the other day, and he was like, who?
Yeah, it's not embarrassing because I don't know who that is.
He's a rapper.
We should remind people to email us. What do you listen to when you're driving?
Yes.
Hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. I'll just mention it one last time.
Wait, I have to say one more thing, though. A movie with a great soundtrack, Atomic Blonde, and this is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's got great car scenes in it, and I just rewatched it. And in terms of like 80s music and aesthetics and everything, it's perfect.
Nice. Yeah. I'll rewatch it. I liked it the first time, but I'll watch it again. Excellent. Well, that does it for this week's episode. Join us next week when we talk with Emily Miller.
I'm Hannah Elliott.
And I'm Matt Miller.
And this is Bloomberg.